This is the impact of agricultural practices. I'm Alex.
I'm Sean.
I'm Sahil.
And I'm Winston.
Agricultural practices. The definition is various methods and techniques used in farming to cultivate crops and rear livestock, ensuring food production and sustainability. The main issue that comes from some of the main agricultural practices is despite the increased food production and sustainability, people tend to overlook the negative environmental factors that come from high production. Today we are going to be looking at 4 of the main agricultural practices. The first, monocropping; the second, tilling; the third, slash and burn; and finally, synthetic and organic fertilizers.
So the first agricultural practice we're going to be covering is monocropping. Monocropping is the practice of growing one crop on the same land every year. This is most commonly done with corn, wheat, and soybeans. History of monocropping. The practice of monocropping originated in the 50s and 60s during the Green Revolution, which was started by Norman Borlaug. The reason that this began being used was because of new technology. Chemical fertilizers, new cereal grains, and large farm machinery made monocropping much easier, and that is why it became a popular method of farming, despite the many negatives. Monocropping in the Green Revolution contributed in large part to the shift away from small family-owned farms to much larger farms. The goal of monocropping is to increase yields, and Borlaug started this practice as part of his mission to feed the world. Some of the positives of monocropping is that it leads to higher yields and it's more economical. When you farm only one crop, the crop you're doing it with is likely perfectly suited to your environment instead of growing several crops that are suited just okay to the environment, which means that it'll lead to higher yields overall. Monocropping is also cheaper because farmers can buy seeds in bulk, and due to the higher yields, it can be more profitable. While there are benefits to monocropping, as previously mentioned, there are definitely some drawbacks to this agricultural practice. One of the biggest is that monocropping harms soil because all of the crops being harvested at the same time, and as a result, the soil is left bare, which leads to erosion and degradation. Additionally, biodiversity is lost when the entire field is made up of only one crop. This makes the field more susceptible to disease because all the crops are the same, so disease can spread more rapidly. Monocropping also makes crops more susceptible to pests because there are fewer natural predators in a field of all one crop.
Tilling. Tilling is the process of breaking up and turning over the top layer of soil in order to prepare the soil for planting. This practice typically involves machinery, involves excessive digging and stirring of soil. The history of tilling. In 1731, Jethro Tull, an English scientist, proposed that plants consume what we know as soil through his new book, An Essay on the Principles of Vegetation and Tillage. This work emphasized the need to crush the soil in order for plants to gain access to the richest portions of earth, which were, at the moment, bound in chunks of soil. Over time, scientists made great strides in understanding the makeup of soil and plant nutrient requirements. M.C. Sewell's publication of Tillage, a review of the literature, in the Agronomy Journal was the first on tillage for the journal, which is the official journal of American Society of Agronomy. The Dust Bowl of the 1930s caused many people to adopt reduced tillage strategies in order to conserve soil. This carried over after the Dust Bowl and was seen in reduced tillage popular practices in the 1970s. The pros of tillage. Soil improvement, which is where tillage improves the quality of soil, has many benefits to plant growth. Tilling also controls the growth of weeds and buries their seeds. Pest elimination. Pests that burrow in soil, such as insects and larvae, are killed through tilling. Seedbed preparation. Since tilling loosens soil, the improved soil-to-seed contact generates an improved space for germination. Cons of tilling. Soil compaction. Tilling can possibly destroy the structure of soil, which leads to soil compaction. Erosion. Ineffective tilling is destroying the structure of soil, which leads to increased erosion and even runoff. This leads to a loss in topsoil and possibly the pollution of local water supplies. Loss of organic matter. Tilling can potentially disrupt the natural food web of soil, which can cause organic matter to decay at a quicker rate than plants can utilize it. Lastly, nitrogen loss. During the process of tilling, nitrogen is taken from the soil, especially when this occurs in the winter.
What is the technique slash and burn? This is a technique that involves cutting down existing vegetation and burning it in order to create way for new crops and vegetation. This technique is much older than you may think. It can date back around 12,000 years ago and was one of the first large-scale methods used to produce crops quickly. At this time, many of the communities were hunter-gatherers, so this method could provide much larger yields and they could collect on their own. Fun fact, this is one of the main reasons that communities began to shift towards agricultural societies and not hunter-gatherers. Some of the benefits include the introduction of new fertilizers to the area for the crops to grow in, nutrient-rich soil, and the rapid clearance of the land so that crops can have more room to grow. Many of these benefits were very essential to communities in the past as it was an easy way to make quick crops. Despite some of the positives, the negatives tower over the temporary benefits. For example, slash and burn can create widespread deforestation from the burning of all the vegetation. And despite rich nutrients in the ash, the soils will remain bare with very little protection from winds and rains. Combine that with no protection from the surrounding trees and you have a high-risk field. There is also a rapid loss of biodiversity as all the surrounding animals and vegetation in the area are burned or cut down. The burning of all of these releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, being one of the many driving factors behind climate change. Additionally, there is an obvious negative effect on the surrounding animals in the ecosystem in much of the areas at high risk of wildfires. Yikes, there are so many more negatives than positives. Might want to consider a different method.
Synthetic fertilizers, also known as inorganic fertilizers, are another method used for agriculture processes. They are chemicals produced industrially to provide plants with essential nitrogens, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They are derived from synthetic compounds to promote productivity, unlike organic fertilizers, which come from natural sources such as compost and manure. The history of inorganic fertilizers dates back to the early 19th and 20th centuries. Initially, mineral fertilizers were made out of guano and mine salts, but in 1909 there was a major breakthrough in nitrogen fixation, which provided a way for inorganic fertilizers to be produced on a large scale. Following the Green Revolution, fertilizers became extremely popular and used to this day. There are many pros of synthetic fertilizers. Some of these positives include being high and rich in nutrient content, which makes it easier for plants to absorb. They are also fast-acting and dissolve quickly, making it easier to deliver nutrients. They are also more affordable than organic fertilizers, especially for large-scale farming. Finally, they are easy to store, transport, and apply for farmers. However, there are also many cons of synthetic fertilizers. Environmental pollution is a major one, as excess runoff can pollute water bodies, leading to water contamination, harming aquatic life. Next, synthetic fertilizers can harm organisms in the soil, which will decrease soil health and nutrient cycling. Finally, the production and use of these fertilizers contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, which can directly affect climate change. Thank you for listening.